This practice explores what we collect, what we notice, and what seems to become meaningful when we pay attention. And like all of my practices, the goal isn't to necessarily figure out what an object or an image means. The purpose really is more about building a relationship with it and noticing what emerges. So the theme of this practice is gathered with care. Notice what has been collected, chosen, or saved. And this practice is part of my artifact exploration series. I do have a full downloadable PDF guide available if you're interested in getting a much more robust practice guide for this theme or this topic. I have ways to enter into the exploration using image cards like tarot, oracle, dixit, charms, found objects, found text, or imagination. And then I also have, some different ways to expand exploration, of course, and deepen reflection. And the practice that I'm going to be doing today is what I refer to as creating an artifact collection. And this is all in the guide as well. But the purpose of creating an artifact collection is to notice what becomes visible when meaningful things are gathered together. And so for this, you can choose anywhere from 3 to 8 artifacts. So you could choose tarot cards from one deck, from different decks. You could choose tarot and oracle. You could use a card and a charm, images and poetry, really any type of combination that sparks your curiosity and interest or seems to call to you in some way. And I want to mention a little bit about the way that these artifacts are gathered, right? So as we know, if we are familiar with tarot cards and working with tarot and oracle, we can choose cards deliberately where we're kind of like going through and looking at the images and choosing a card, or kind of more randomly where we mix it up and then we just kind of choose one without looking. I also want to introduce a way to choose one, which is, I think about it more intentionally, where we're kind of sitting with a feeling or a theme or a question, and we're pulling things around that theme, question, or feeling. And that's different than the intuitive one. The intuitive one is just kind of like noticing what we are drawn to and then choosing that, right? So you might choose cards that, catch your eye, or something that just seems to like call to you for some reason. And you don't really know why you chose it per se, but it just kind of seems to resonate with you for some reason. And that's different than intentionally. So maybe I have a question and I want to pull things that seem to organize themselves around that question, or I want to explore a particular feeling that I'm having. So I'm going to choose things that seem to mirror that feeling. So there's a little bit more intentionality around that, or just without deciding, right? So that could even, without deciding, could be randomly, or it could be I'm just going to quickly just pull some like 3 things and I'm not really thinking much about it. So those are 3 ways. I actually kind of want to talk a little bit more about these before we get into this, right? So going back to that intuitively. So when we're choosing things intuitively, I also want to say you can mix and match these. So maybe you choose one thing intuitively, one more intentionally, and one randomly, right? So there's no like set way. You're not locked into anything. For the purposes of this practice, to keep it fairly brief, I'm only going to choose 3 artifacts. So if I'm choosing intuitively, I'm going to allow myself to be drawn towards what I notice, right? So I'm going to choose something that catches my eye for whatever reason, or something that I'm curious about. Or I might, like I was saying, if I'm gathering objects or charms, I don't necessarily like know why I'm pulling it. It's just interesting to me for some reason. So when I do that, I'm going to just go ahead and pull this intuitively. So when I'm choosing things face up, I don't like to go typically through my entire deck or my entire collection. To keep it fairly streamlined, I just go with the first one that grabs me. So I'm just gonna kind of start like going through these cards, and I'm just gonna stop when I find something that feels remotely like interesting to me, again, for whatever reason, and I don't need to know why. It doesn't need to be, okay, so this one, I like this one. And then I'm gonna note it, and then I'm gonna kind of sit with it and ask myself, what drew me to this? Or what did I notice first? Or what made this feel worth including? And so when we're choosing intuitively, the emphasis is on discovery. So noticing what is calling for attention. And so, you know, what drew me to this was like this feather and like the crescent moon. And if I'm, you know, going through this and journaling around, I would definitely want to journal around this. I would definitely want to, you know, write down what card I chose and kind of maybe jot down some thoughts to those answers. So next I want to show or demonstrate about intentionally choosing. So this is about, and I'll pull a charm for this. So this is about gathering artifacts around like a theme, a question, or a feeling. So you might choose, if you're using cards, you might choose a card that represents something important to you. You might want to choose an object from your space that has personal meaning, or maybe even a charm that seems to have personal meaning or represent something meaningful to you, right? Almost like the charms are symbols, symbolizing things. Or maybe you choose a card that is connected to a question that you are exploring, or you know, a recent journal entry. The text that you use can even be something that you created. So I'm going to think about choosing something more intentionally here. And I'm going to choose, I like this idea of like the feather, right? So I'm choosing something that maybe kind of goes along with that. So I'm choosing this little like angel wing or fairy wing or bird wing, whatever, a wing, right? Kind of even like almost looks like the feather in terms of the shape. So I chose that really more like intentionally, kind of around this theme that's emerging. And so when I choose something intentionally, I'm going to ask myself, why does this belong in the collection? What does it add? And what does this help me notice, right? And so the emphasis here is on curation, right? We're actively creating meaning, right? I have this image and I'm specifically choosing something else. And in this case, my theme was around like the feather kind of a theme. So I chose this. So that kind of is a little bit more on the nose about why it belongs in the collection. But this is really starting, for me, the theme of softness, right? This like very gentle, soft feather, this like kind of ethereal, light wing, maybe also themes around air. Okay. And so then the next way is to choose something without deciding. And I'm going to choose one of my object cards. Where is it? I have my object cards, and then I also have my archetype cards. But I'm not going to choose an archetype. I'm going to choose one of my object cards. And for this one, I'm going to, so without deciding is when you're kind of choosing quickly, almost like assembling a collection before you really even know like what it contains. And I write all these descriptions more as if you're going to be choosing multiple things through that method, right? So I could just be choosing like, you know, this charm and like this charm and this charm. And I'm not really pausing to think about what I'm doing. And it's not even necessarily, it doesn't need to be a random pull, although it, you know, certainly can. But this, I'm going to pull without deciding. And I do like to look at them because this is a collection. So for me personally, I don't really want to choose 100% blindly without seeing anything. But I'm just going to really kind of go, once I'm done explaining, I'm going to just kind of pull potion. I like that one. That just like really was like top of mind, of course. Okay. And then, you know, asking, what did I gather? You know, what connections appear? So that question is kind of a little bit more useful if I'm pulling multiple things, right? So I might pull elixir and like these are kind of like magical things that someone would consume. What story emerges from what has come together? So, just thinking about how that relate, what did I gather? Potion, what connections appear? I don't really know because I only pulled one card without deciding. And the story that emerges from what has come together. Again, I can't really answer that because I just pulled, one card with that method. But this really emphasizes emergence, right? So kind of discovering meaning after the collection forms. And actually, you know what? As I'm saying that, I could actually really start to apply those to these three items in the collection. So what did I gather? I gathered, this image of the person laying on the moon, the feather, the wing, and potion. So connections, there's this like kind of magical, right? This is definitely in like a magical space. And then I can think about the story that emerges. So I can start to, this is really getting into a creative space of like even kind of just jotting down. I would keep it brief, like maybe a 3-line story, just something super small, right? Because this isn't even the full exploration yet, right? So now I'm going to start to notice this collection and thinking about each one individually, which we kind of did, and then kind of stepping back and noticing the collection as a whole. Okay, so kind of noticing what seems to belong together. These two definitely seem to belong more together. What connections begin to emerge? Maybe this was her wing, I don't know. Themes, symbols, colors, or feelings that are present. So like I was saying, there's like this really gentle feeling. Any contrasts that catch your attention? What feels intentionally gathered? What seems out of place, right? For me, the potion seems a little bit out of place. And again, if I had more items in the collection, things might fit differently. But because there's only 3, it's kind of like odd one out, I guess. What feels unexpected or surprising? If this were a museum exhibit, what would it be called? And then becoming the curator. So kind of asking yourself, why did you choose each artifact? What story does the collection itself tell? What might you add? And then this is where you can really kind of play around and think about something that you would add. You can, look through your cards. You could look at your different charms. If you're using like more of a symbols deck, you could kind of look through and see something that you might actually add to this space. What might you set aside? So maybe I decide, I'm going to swap out potion and I'm going to put in something else. I'm going to put in spell. Right now it looks like she's under a spell, right? I completely changed the collection, right? And then if somebody visited this collection, what might they understand about you? Like what would they think about, or how are you reflected here in a way that somebody else could pick up on, right? And then bringing it home. So what does this collection reveal about you? What you notice, what you choose, what you make room for? What broader themes, archetypes, or ideas are reflected in this collection? What might each of the artifacts in your collection represent, symbolize, or point to, right? This is almost like becoming a little bit of a language, right? Where each item is a container for a much larger idea, right? If this collection were reflecting something in your life, what might it be showing you? What might this be like a mirror of? What parts of your own experience do you recognize in this collection? And you can even just be really on the nose. Sleep, right? I sleep. That's pretty not super deep, but you never know what can be a doorway and what can be a starting point, okay? And then what feels newly recognized by seeing these things gathered together, right? And then of course, capturing it as a word, a phrase, a question, a color, a sketch, a sticker, a sentence, or anything really that represents what you discovered. For me, I like spell. Spell feels very succinct, right? And then I also, in my guide for this particular practice, I have ways to deepen your reflection. So you can use it with any artifact exploration, even if you do one of the single artifacts where you're just working with like a card or something. And change the medium is where you continue your exploration, but using a different creative form. So one of them is writing a list of 4 additional items that either belong in the collection or along with your artifact. So you can just kind of think of that top of mind, or I could maybe, because I have these kind of like word cards, I might add, find 4. Maybe I include like a charm to go with it. Another example or another way to change the medium, I'm not going to go through all of them, but another one is to write a question that your collection or artifact brings forward. Another way to deepen is to change the lens. So kind of returning either to your artifact or your collection on another day and asking yourself or journaling around, what it might reveal around what you value, what you notice, what I've gathered through different seasons of my life. So different ways to play with that question. And then also staying with one question. So instead of going through every single prompt, just kind of reading through it and choosing a single question that seems to call to you in some way, and just kind of sitting with it throughout the day, letting it waft in and out of your awareness, and then noticing any types of memories or images or connections or new possibilities that begin to gather around it. So if this exploration has sparked something for you, and you want the full practice, I do have my Gathered with Care Artifact Exploration Guide, which includes all the prompts and different ways to enter the practice, different doorways, additional ways to like deepen the practice. So you can certainly use that independently on your own with the guide, or if you want more support exploring what comes up or having more of a guided process, I also offer artifact exploration sessions for each of the artifact exploration topics. So in session, we can begin with an artifact that feels really meaningful to you. We can explore, we can do kind of more of that curated collection spread and really kind of get down into, the images, associations, memories, and connections that you have personally, and just kind of follow what unfolds. And again, I always like to bring it back to you and making it meaningful for you. So be sure to subscribe to my channel for more super creative ways for self-exploration and personal growth.